At 3:14 inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Spruance, a junior petty officer studying a sonar waterfall display noticed something unusual. Not a contact, not a clear track, a gap, a pocket of acoustic silence in the Gulf of Oman where there should have been something. Ambient ocean noise, biological activity, distant shipping traffic, or the layered turbulence created when warm surface water meets colder depths. Instead, about 14 nautical miles southeast of the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, the ocean had gone strangely quiet. In underwater acoustics, silence can mean only one thing. Something is hiding there. Something diesel-electric, running on batteries, creeping forward at roughly 4 knots to keep noise levels as low as possible. Something that had been following the strike group for nearly 6 hours. The USS Abraham Lincoln is not a vessel that moves unnoticed. CVN-72, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, displaces more than 100,000 tons when fully loaded and carries a crew of around 5,000 sailors and aviators. From orbit, satellites can easily track its presence. In the ocean, sensitive hydrophones can detect its machinery from extraordinary distances. Weeks earlier, the carrier had entered the U.S. Fifth Fleet area of operations as tensions with Iran moved beyond routine diplomacy. Its embarked air wing, Carrier Air Wing 9, includes F/A-18E and F/A-18F Super Hornets, F-35C Lightning II aircraft from VMFA-314, EA-18G Growlers for electronic warfare, and E-2D Advanced Hawkeye aircraft that coordinate the strike group's airborne awareness. Taken together, it represents one of the most powerful aviation forces operating anywhere in the Arabian Sea. What it was now facing beneath the water was Iran's most capable underwater platform. Capable, in this context, requires some explanation. Iran operates 3 Project 877 Kilo-class submarines, referred to locally as the Tariq class. Built in Russia and delivered during the 1990s, each submarine measures roughly 74 meters long and displaces about 3,000 tons when submerged. Each carries 6 forward torpedo tubes. Russian crews once gave these submarines a nickname, Black Hole. Their hulls are covered with anechoic rubber tiles designed to absorb sonar energy and reduce outgoing acoustic noise. When operating slowly on electric motors, a kilo can become extremely difficult to detect. In the right environment, it behaves less like a machine and more like a quiet piece of the ocean that has decided to move. But difficult to detect does not mean invisible. The tiles reduce the acoustic signature enough that distinguishing the submarine from background ocean noise requires sustained attention from multiple sensors. That's exactly what the Abraham Lincoln's anti-submarine warfare screen is designed to provide. And on this particular morning, the conditions were not working in Iran's favor. 3 days earlier, a P-8A Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft flying out of Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE had deployed a pattern of AN/SSQ-53G sonobuoys across a suspected submarine transit route. During the patrol, the aircraft's APY-10 multimode radar briefly detected a snorkel mast at the edge of its range. The contact lasted only 11 seconds before disappearing beneath the water. 11 seconds was enough. That single data point was combined with shipping lane analysis and signals intelligence gathered from intercepted Iranian naval communications. Analysts used the information to estimate the submarine's most likely movement pattern. By the time the strike group entered the area, the submarine wasn't an unknown. It was a variable already included in the operational picture. The strategy Iran was attempting had been refined over decades of exercises focused on countering aircraft carriers. On paper, the concept is straightforward. The Persian Gulf and surrounding waters create natural choke points. A submarine moving slowly on battery power could theoretically use thermal layers and the acoustic noise of heavy commercial shipping to mask its approach. If it could get close enough, it might launch torpedoes before defensive helicopters could respond. But the plan requires several things to go perfectly. Patience, exceptional discipline from the submarine crew, and most importantly, an unnoticed gap in the carrier group's anti-submarine defenses. That morning, there were no gaps. At 3:17, the Spruance's contact evaluation reached the carrier's Tactical Action Officer. Classification, probable submarine, bearing 142, range 14 nautical miles, profile consistent with Project 877 Kilo-class running on electric drive, slow. The message reached the Tactical Action Officer aboard the carrier. He picked up the phone and spoke only 3 words. Launch the Romeos. The MH-60R Seahawk helicopter is the product of decades spent solving one specific challenge: finding submarines that are actively trying not to be found. Air crews call it the Romeo, and it carries one of the most advanced airborne anti-submarine systems ever installed on a helicopter. Its primary sensor is the AQS-22 Advanced Airborne Low Frequency Sonar, known as ALFS. It works as a dipping sonar. The helicopter descends into a low hover and lowers a sonar transducer into the water on a cable. Once submerged, the system begins listening. Not just for propellers, it searches for pressure disturbances, subtle temperature changes, acoustic shadows, and mechanical signatures that reveal a submarine's presence. The data feeds into onboard processing systems capable of identifying contacts with remarkable precision. In acoustic environments where older systems would detect only noise, ALFS can separate different submarine classes by their mechanical fingerprints. Within 4 minutes of the alert, 2 Romeos from Helicopter Maritime Strike Squadron 71 lifted off from the Abraham Lincoln's flight deck. A third followed 90 seconds later. The helicopters moved toward the suspected contact in a wide triangular pattern, flying low over the water to reduce radar visibility and maintaining radio silence. Below the surface, the Iranian crew heard nothing. They rarely do. At 0331, Romeo 1 reached its first dipping position roughly 9 nautical miles from the estimated contact. The sonar transducer slipped into the water. Within 2 minutes, the acoustic picture formed. Single-screw diesel electric propulsion. Machinery noise consistent with a Project 877 hull. Estimated depth, 90 meters. Speed, 4 knots. Bearing 138. The submarine had been slowly edging east, adjusting position for a better firing angle against the carrier's projected path. Romeo 2 confirmed the contact from a second dipping point 4 nautical miles away. The 2 helicopters triangulated the location, shrinking the uncertainty area to roughly 600 meters. For what was about to happen, that was more than precise enough. At 3:38, the submarine fired. Inside the Iranian control room, the decision reflected months of preparation and mounting pressure. The crew believed their quiet approach had kept them undetected. 2 Valfajr heavyweight torpedoes launched from the forward tubes seconds apart. These were Iranian-produced 533mm torpedoes designed for both active and passive acoustic homing. Their targeting solution had been calculated using the carrier's acoustic signature, a signal that is not particularly difficult to detect. A nuclear-powered carrier displacing more than 100,000 tons generates a distinctive low-frequency sound that travels considerable distances underwater. The Valfajr torpedoes are serious weapons. Iran developed them during the 2000s after years of reliance on foreign suppliers. Against commercial ships or lightly defended vessels, they could be extremely effective. But the Abraham Lincoln was operating with a full anti-submarine defense network. At 3:38 and 23 seconds, Romeo 1's acoustic system captured the firing event before the torpedoes had traveled even 400 meters. First came the hydraulic pressure sound from the torpedo tube flooding sequence. 11 seconds later, the distinct launch signatures of 2 weapons leaving the submarine. Within 45 seconds, the helicopters had resolved the firing submarine's bearing, range, and depth with targeting accuracy. They did not need permission. Authorization to defend the carrier had been granted days earlier when the submarine's movement was first assessed as potentially hostile. Romeo 1 released a Mark 54 lightweight torpedo. Romeo 2 released a second weapon, offset roughly 800 meters to prevent the submarine from escaping between them. The Mark 54 is the U.S. Navy's standard anti-submarine torpedo for air-delivered engagements. Measuring 12.75 inches in diameter, it uses an electric propulsion system powered by a seawater-activated silver oxide battery and can reach speeds above 40 knots. Its guidance system combines active and passive acoustic tracking and was specifically designed for the complex shallow water environments where older torpedoes struggled. The system can navigate thermal layers that once confused earlier weapons. It can classify targets well enough to reject false signals from marine life or background noise. In the Gulf of Oman, at a depth of 90 meters against a 74-meter submarine moving at 4 knots, the torpedo's task was straightforward. The Kilo-class crew had roughly 70 seconds between launching their torpedoes and the moment the American weapons would reach them. In that brief window, the Iranian captain made the only move available to him. Emergency blow, flood aft ballast tanks. Full electric power, turn toward the incoming torpedoes. Inside the Iranian submarine, the captain ordered every maneuver available. The crew attempted to force the boat upward, accelerate on electric drive, and angle the hull toward the approaching weapons to reduce their profile. None of it changed the outcome. The first Mark 54 detonated beneath the submarine's keel, near frame 34. The underwater explosion created a powerful pressure bubble that collapsed against the hull, inducing a severe structural stress through the pressure section. A submarine hull is designed to withstand pressure from the outside. It is not designed to survive that kind of force from beneath. The structure failed. The second torpedo was recalled. It wasn't necessary. At 0347, the USS Abraham Lincoln continued northeast at 18 knots. Its heading had not changed. Its speed had not changed. On the flight deck, preparations were already underway to launch an E-2D Hawkeye as part of the carrier's scheduled operations. The 2 torpedoes the submarine had launched continued searching for a target. For 19 minutes, they ran their terminal homing patterns before their power cells were exhausted and the weapons sank harmlessly into the depths. They never acquired the carrier. Between the launch point and the strike group, the water had become filled with acoustic activity from the MH-60R helicopters operating their dipping sonars. Those signals created enough interference in the same frequency bands that the torpedo seekers struggled to separate the carrier's signature from the surrounding noise. In effect, the helicopters had unintentionally disrupted the torpedoes simply by conducting normal anti-submarine operations. Looking at the encounter from a strategic perspective reveals a stark contrast. Iran lost 1 operational Kilo-class submarine, roughly 1/3 of its heavy submarine fleet. Each vessel represents hundreds of millions of dollars in acquisition and decades of training investment. In the current geopolitical climate, replacing such a submarine would be extremely difficult. The crew aboard the vessel, more than 50 trained submariners, represented years of specialized preparation that cannot be replaced quickly. 2 heavyweight torpedoes were also expended during the attack. On the other side of the ledger, the U.S. Navy used 2 Mark 54 lightweight torpedoes and routine helicopter flight operations that were already part of the strike group's defensive posture. Beyond equipment costs, the strategic effect was far larger. The encounter provided detailed acoustic recordings of submarine movement, tactics, and operational behavior. Data like that becomes valuable reference material for future anti-submarine operations. The Persian Gulf and nearby waters have often been described as complex acoustic environments, where submarines might gain an advantage by blending into shipping noise and layered water temperatures. What this encounter demonstrated is that complexity works both ways. A submarine operating in those waters can still be tracked if enough sensors, aircraft, ships, and analysts are focused on the same problem. When a vessel is monitored from the moment it leaves port, when its movements are observed by systems it cannot detect, and when it launches weapons into an environment already filled with defensive sensors, the outcome becomes increasingly predictable. The MH-60R helicopters returned to the Abraham Lincoln at 4:12. Within minutes, they were refueled and prepared for another patrol cycle. Far below the surface, the ocean floor now held the remains of a submarine that had once been considered one of the region's most capable underwater platforms. For the carrier strike group, the patrol continued. Encounters like this rarely appear in headlines, but they illustrate how control of the sea is often decided quietly, through surveillance, coordination, and systems working together long before the first weapon is ever launched. If you found this breakdown useful, consider subscribing and sharing the video. Your support helps bring more detailed stories about modern naval operations and maritime strategy to the channel.